and welcome everybody. I'm Val Jonas and I'm delighted to have the opportunity to share my thoughts on changing risk. So recently I've been thinking about how important it is to energize risk, and so that's what my presentation is all about. I'm sure that all of you risk professionals out there are very experienced at running risk workshops. So I thought that in order to energize risk, I would instead run a risk workout. Maybe that's something you can think of going forwards to get people really enthused about going into sessions talking about risk. So here goes. So first of all, so here you can see a picture of me energized. Now you can see the smile on my face. I've just spotted the finish line on the Great North Run, but I'm going to come back and talk a little bit more about that later. First of all, I want to wind back 18 months when my view of risk changed after attending a workshop of about 80 people in London. We were all risk people, and the reason we were there was we were going to talk about what was the role of a risk professional. And I'm sure that's probably the sort of thing that you've asked yourself over time. It was really an extraordinarily insightful day. As time went on, we realised that there were quite different views of what a risk professional actually is. And as the afternoon wore on, we realised that they were almost like we were on two sides of the room. On one side, we were people focusing on supporting the risk process, ensuring compliance and managing risk, supporting teams in their focus on risk and risk mitigation, and making sure risk got done, risk management got done. And then there was the other side of the room. There we had risk professionals who said, well, we actually need to change the way we think about risk, the way we look at risk, and look more to the future, understand what's happening and what we're going to do about the fast-moving change and uncertainty that we face in today's world, and also tuning into where their organisation and the environment in which they are working is moving. So what does the future mean for our organisation? How are we going to tackle the change and the uncertainty that we can see coming towards us? Or maybe that we're not seeing, and that we need to actually open our eyes to looking ahead. And I think there was also some discussions that we had over how we tackle engaging senior managers, and I'll come back to that a bit later. So from the point of view of all these people in the room, I could see both sides of the picture. It was interesting that even though I could see on the one side that the management of risk is absolutely fundamental, it's part of the rules in which you run your business. You actually have to ensure that you're dealing with all those uncertainties. But the way I felt was a completely different level of energy when I was debating and talking about the forward view. And I thought this might be a clue as to how we energize our looking at risk in our organizations. So of course we need to manage risk, focus on compliance, controls and so on, but we also need to inject some energy into risk thinking. Which brings me to the Great North Run. It was about the same time as that London workshop that my daughter persuaded me to take up running. First of all, we did a simple 5K park run, and we went on to a 10K charity run. And finally, a few weeks later, I was elated to be able to join 50,000 people to run the biggest half marathon in the world. It's been a fantastic experience, from first pushing ourselves to get motivated and get out there. And park run, I have to say, was a great motivator. But as we found our sore muscles reduced and we got more stamina, it was great to experience the clear head you get after a good run and the ability to think clearly and feel positive. And so it's given me lots of ideas about changing risk by boosting positive thinking. Sometimes facing risk and uncertainty can feel like an assault course, whether it's just us dealing with it or we're trying to carry our organisations with us. You've got to work out how to get over and under and around those obstacles. But when you're thinking positively, you'll find that you start using positive words, and it's so much more exciting to be talking about things in a really forward-looking way. So I want you to think about how you use the words when you talk to people at risk. Things like capacity, power, dynamism. I'm sure you can think of many, many more. It's all about being creative about risk and taking our organisations with us in a positive way. So that run, I couldn't have done it on my own. It was a journey I took with my daughter, and we each boosted each other's morale, which takes me on to thinking about risk synergy. Let's have a look at what does this mean. So synergy is the creation of a whole that's greater than the parts, and it comes from the Greek word meaning working together. In a changing world with events moving ever faster and an expectation that data is available at the touch of a button in our digital world, senior managers are asking for more information at very short notice. Great risk practice is going on across various parts of our organisations, from functions to programmes and projects, operations and in strategic planning. Unfortunately, this is often happening in pockets or silos around the business. And trying to provide a coherent picture to management is an increasing challenge. As risk professionals, we're expected to bring all this information together, harnessing these separate pockets of risk energy into a coherent whole, something that we are challenged with. And it can bring so much more than just providing a joined up picture. It allows us to identify important risks that we may not have previously thought of. An example springs to mind when I did some work with a large global organisation, bringing together their functional managers to brainstorm risk across their functions. And it was truly eye-opening for me that everyone in the room started identifying cross-functional risks that weren't on any risk register up to that point. For example, the engineering lead expressed concern that the Windows 10 upgrade might have a serious impact on a couple of major project milestones coming up. The IT manager expressed great surprise and said it would be easy to rearrange their rollout program to accommodate those milestones. And so it went on, not only identifying risks, but solving them in the same session. Connecting risk is also a way in which organisations can spot trends and weak points, and also opportunities and ways of gaining competitive advantage. It can be mind-blowing. We can all learn from each other, and action is often easier than we think, especially if we act early enough. Human beings are ingenious, and if we pool our ideas, we can do amazing things. Once we know what we're facing, it's much easier to deal with things. Which brings me to some more strong words. Perspectives. Understanding risk from different perspectives can really support new ways of thinking. Knowledge, shared and pooled knowledge knowledge is king, and also communication. If we don't communicate risk across our organisations, how are we going to know what are the big challenges that we face? Which brings me on to how we risk professionals talk. How do we talk to senior managers, the C-suite and the board? So about a year ago, we started working on a white paper exploring risk intelligence and trying to understand what challenges face us across the organisation. First of all, we realised that risk actually has bad PR. So as risk professionals, we're all completely sold on risk management. But what about the rest of the organisation? Perhaps they aren't so keen. It just tends to give them the feeling of negativity, red cards being put up, and it's not part of their day job. They've already got a job to do, and then you're asking them to do risk on top. So how do we change the way people think about risk and its bad PR? So we decided that one of the things that maybe we need to think about doing is stop using the phrase risk management, because senior managers don't tend to talk about risk management, they just talk about risk and opportunity. So we thought maybe that's one of the things that we could do as risk professionals, change the way we talk about risk. If you look at successful business leaders, for example, Ed Catmull of Pixar, one of his quotes, "It's not the manager's job to prevent risks, it's the manager's job to make it safe to take them." So we all need to think about how our organisations regard risk and whether they see it as something to be avoided. And of course, being risk averse is effectively taking risk. We all know that as risk professionals, but we have to find ways of helping our senior managers understand that. Another quote that I really love from Wayne Gretzky, Canadian ice hockey pro: "You'll always miss 100% of the shots you don't take." We've got to get out there and do it. Otherwise, our organisations are going to slowly slide against the uncertainty we face in the future. So, I'm sure any manager would agree that you need to manage risk, but it's bigger than that. As risk professionals, we can deal with a negative view of risk and change it for the better. Seeing it as a new approach to business. By tuning into C-suite thinking, we can engage from the top down. So some of the words we might use are thinking about what is the company's vision for risk? How does risk align with your values? What kind of risks should we take? What are the opportunities? What risks do we really not want to take? So you could take an example of two businesses in the same sector, a couple of airlines. If you look at a budget airline, then they have a very different view of the values that they have and how they treat customers than an elite carrier. So a budget airline, they don't really focus that much on customer service. Their values are around making it as cheap as possible to fly, whereas an elite carrier really needs to make sure they look after their customers. So even though they're in the same business, they have different values, they have a different vision for risk, and their results are based on different priorities in terms of how they're actually planning and taking risk. Okay, so we've looked at three different levels. We've looked at being creative as risk professionals, that's energizing ourselves. We've looked at risk synergy, which is around energizing our teams, our organizations, cross-functional, across all the different operational and change programs and strategy. And we've looked at the leadership and risk intelligence from the top down in the company. So why do we do all this? Well, we want to achieve risk success. And risk success is all about, in my opinion, positive risk thinking. Change the way we think about risks from a negative to a positive, and people will go with you. They will start believing with you. Explain to people that risk is a positive force for good. It can do many, many good things. It's the sort of thing that will allow you to be competitive. Look for risks that are that your organization can take better than your competitors. There's your competitive advantage. So it's not all about managing risk, it's also about taking risk. And look into the future, look far into the future, look at the assault course in front of you. What are the brick walls? And if you plan far enough in advance, you can shape the organization of your organizations. Now, what senior manager, what person in C-suite would not want help with shaping the future of risk and the risk that the organization faces? So once again, some words to think about. We need to make good risk-based decisions. You need to be decisive. You can only be decisive if you're confident about what you can see coming up in the future. And also, being decisive is important when you maybe find that things aren't going quite as planned or something unexpected comes up. The more ready you are and confident you are in understanding what the future looks like, then the more decisive you can be in taking fast decisions. And we know these days with the internet and social media that managers and organizations need to be very fast in responding to events, because social media will be there before you. You've got to be ready. Another thing that we all know is vitally important is innovation. Good risk thinking, positive risk thinking, forward risk thinking allows you to be innovative. It's really the way that you energize your teams and give them confidence that they can come up with ideas, manage the risks around those ideas, look for opportunities. That gives you the ability to be innovative. It's a way of future-proofing your organizations. So let's summarize. It's time to get energized. I've got 3 things that I think it might be useful for you to go away and think about. First of all, when you're talking, how do you come across? Are you sending positive risk vibes? Are people feeling energized by the way you're suggesting they approach risk? Or are you sounding negative? Do they think you're going to come and put a red card up, tell them that they've got to do all those sort of boring things that they think are associated with risk? Secondly, be curious about the future. Curious is a lovely word. I think we should all be looking to see, what are the things that I could achieve? What are the opportunities out there? And of course, what are the risks? And we will have to manage them. But being curious about the future means that you're ready for the uncertainty that's coming up. You're not just looking at your feet, you're looking far across the horizon. And lastly, but I think the most important, is believe in the power of risk. Because if you believe, then the people you are associated with, they will believe in. And if you're positive, they will be positive too. I go back to my first 5K run and think, it was raining and I was really feeling nervous, but we did it. And as soon as you realize you can do it, then you realize the power of, you can do anything you want. Okay, so we come to questions, I think. Thank you for listening. If you're interested, you can download our white paper from our riskdecisions.com website. And if you enjoyed my talk, then connect to me on LinkedIn, Val Jonas. Thank you very much.
Excellent, Val. Thank you very much for your presentation. It certainly has made me think about more carefully the words I use when writing articles about risk management. I want to kick off the Q&A session with one of my own questions, and then I will work through the questions that are being posed by the audience. You mentioned earlier that we must stop using the phrase risk management. And there's been quite a lot of discussion around the risk manager's job title, that the word risk has negative connotations, as you touched upon earlier. But one risk manager I've spoken to recently, who I put this idea to and asked, well, should we ditch risk from the job titles, disagreed and said that the problem actually lies with the risk managers themselves and how they implement, apply and deliver risk management. But surely, if the word risk does have negative connotations, ditching it from the job titles has got to be a positive way forward. What's your view on that?
Well, that's a very interesting one, because when we embarked on the white paper, we had exactly this discussion. Actually, our view is that risk, it's not that risk is a bad word, it's the context in which we use it that can be quite bad. Oh, sorry. It's the context in which we use it that makes it negative. And it was actually the phrase risk management that we said we had to stop using, or at least only use in very sparing and sensible places. And for example, we looked at what we're called risk decisions. Now, managers, and when you go into a workshop, or in this case, maybe a workout, talking about risk actually does energize people. People like talking about risk. They like talking about problems, how to solve them. Human beings are really enthusiastic about problem solving when you give them some headspace, a bit of time away from their day job. And so I don't think it's the word risk that's a problem. I think it's the phrase risk management. And I also think it's the fact that we're only just starting to understand that the whole kind of compliance side of risk is very important. It's absolutely vital that we have controls and that we maintain safety, and we also ensure our businesses are fit for purpose and abide by the rules of organisations and the industry that we work in. But we need to kind of separate that on one axis, where we have compliance and the rules by which we engage in business, and the other axis, which is risk and the whole innovation piece. So it's, and when I do senior management sessions, masterclasses, in which we explore those two axes of risk, the compliance side and the more energized risk and innovation side. So I don't actually think it's a problem with the word risk. I think it's risk management and risk managers that are the problem. I mean, risk professional is better because it's actually saying that, you know, I am somebody who's leading the way on risk. But yeah, I mean, that's my view, is that if we drop the word risk, then I think we just confuse people.
Excellent. And now for a question from a member of the audience who is asking, how does one explain the difference between risks and opportunities to stakeholders? Do we mean by taking a specific risk, we can grab an opportunity?
Well, I have some really strong views on opportunities, and I know not everybody agrees with me. I think we have serious problems with opportunities because we often take them automatically, we build them into our plans, and actually they end up possibly becoming risks because you've actually already taken an optimistic view of how you're going to do something or run something, or how you know, that opportunity can be materialized. Now, of course, we need to take opportunities, but there's a whole mindset around opportunities that I think we need to work on. That managers, as soon as you mention an opportunity, your manager will automatically have built it into the plan and assumed it's going to happen. And then if you don't achieve that opportunity, it's just become a risk. So the psychology around opportunities is a very tricky one. My preference is to just look at everything going forward as uncertainty, and, you know, along the lines of ISO 31000, where it could be a positive uncertainty or a negative uncertainty, but it could be partway between the two. So, for example, one of the things we've done recently is help people describe risk in terms of, you could save some time, but it might cost you more money. Well, you know, if you take that opportunity, it's a threat to budget, but it's an opportunity in terms of time. So I think threats and opportunities are quite subtle things, and as risk professionals, we need to treat them with great care and be careful that we don't make these things appear cut and dried, because somebody who thinks an opportunity is cut and dried has just immediately turned it into a risk. So that's where I think that separating out risk workshops from opportunity workshops, or if you look at them together, you should always look at opportunities first, because then if it appears that that's something you should take, then maybe you should think about the risk of not achieving that opportunity. So there's a lot of subtlety, and we need to guide our organisations through that difficult minefield of opportunities.
Excellent, thank you, Val. Another question from a member of the audience is, how do you personally apply the principles that you've presented in your own organisation? And to extend on that, what's the end result? What's the outcome?
Well, that's a lovely question, thank you. So the values in our organisation that we abide by are stronger together, adventure, trusted and considerate. And one of the things that we do is apply risk along the lines of those four values. So adventure, we see taking risk as important. We do take risk. We've just opened an office in Canada. We're really excited about it. It's completely energized our organization, even though it's an unknown. It's meant an awful lot of hard work. Risk it's not easy taking risk. It does mean hard work, but when it's positive, then it's 10 times more easier than when it's negative things that you're trying to deal with. So yes, adventure. We encourage everybody in the organisation to have fun. When you're going into a meeting with a customer, we talk to each other and say, okay, let's have fun. This is going to be good. Because if you go in with a smile, somehow the entire thing it lifts everything you do. Stronger together, absolutely. Stronger together when positive things are happening, but also when negative things are happening. And it's amazing as a team, if you have that positive view of things, that actually, even when you go through tricky periods, then you share those things, and actually you can come out of it even stronger than you were before. And of course, the other values are fairly standard: trusted, considerate. Considerate is about listening. Listen to what other people have got to say. You can learn so much from a risk point of view if you just listen. It's one of the things over the years I've felt I haven't done enough of. And I feel like I'm talking too much now, but yes, listening is really important.
Excellent, thank you, Val. I want to explore one of the concepts that you spoke about earlier, about encouraging risk managers to be more creative. Mm-hmm. We recently conducted a survey where we asked our readers, what is it that is slowing down innovation and change? And I just want to share some of the comments that we got from our respondents and just get your view on this. So one respondent wrote, risk management is only considered a compliance requirement with no bearing in strategy setting or decision making. Another respondent wrote that the thing that's slowing down change is the concept of ERM and the titling most risk functions as risk managers, which we touched upon. So what is your view on how risk managers are perceived internally, that they are really seen as a compliance professional?
Yes, well, I think that's a very, very interesting and very topical right now, because I think risk management, or the thinking around risk, is kind of coming to a key point of change. And obviously we're talking about changing risk here. And I guess this comes back to what I was saying earlier about these two axes of risk. One is the compliance axis, the rules that allow you to be in business, and the other is the innovation risk axis, which is the ability for you to win the game, to be successful. And I think as risk professionals, at times we can be our own worst enemies, because we allow ourselves to be seen as those kind of rule, the people who define the rules, as opposed to the people who enable fresh thinking. And if we have those two sides of our job, we've got to work out ways in which we can clearly signal to people when we're being the rule definer and compliance, and when we're being the innovation specialist. And maybe there's the way we have to change risk is we split those things into different roles, so that we aren't compromised. One of the ways I think which we allow ourselves also to be pushed down in an organization is that people constantly say things like, well, what's the value of risk? Prove to me the value of risk. And what I say is, why do I have to prove the value of risk to you? Is risk just not something that, is it not something that everybody just agrees you do need to tackle? And another opinion I have around how we're failing on looking at innovation is that we have to take the fear factor out of this. Risk is associated with fear, and a lot of this has come from things like safety and all of those things are absolutely fundamental to the way we run our businesses. We cannot injure people. We cannot allow viruses and cyber threat to impact our organization. We have to protect our organizations from all of those things. But that just gives people this constant feeling of fear, that risk is all about fearing what might happen to us. Instead of saying, hey, what could we go out there and do? What are the really exciting things that we could, where could we take this organization? Yes, we have to abide by the rules, but it's just like playing a game of football or whatever. You know, the offside trap is very important. You're not going to score a goal if you've been caught offside, but if you don't go out there and go for goal, then you're never going to win. So it's about having those two different aspects that you need to think about, and preventing or encouraging people to look into the future without fear. Look into the future and see what's there. Okay, you might see some things that you don't like, but then you've got the ability to do something about it. So my whole philosophy in life is, as soon as I know about a problem, I'm there solving it. So the more we look into the future and we look at how could we innovate, and people are amazing. People really can solve enormous problems, and they can solve them, especially if they work together.
Excellent. I'm going to squeeze one more question in now, and it's an extension to the survey. So we spoke about the sort of internal perception that internal stakeholders might have of risk managers, i.e. being compliance driven. But another pain point that our readers express quite often is that there's an issue with external stakeholders also. And it's mainly around, this is an insurance question, so I'll read what the respondent has written here. And they say, the first thing that's slowing down change is the insurance industry, i.e. the brokers, the insurers and reinsurers not understanding that risk management is a lot more than just buying insurance. I mean, do we need to speak to external stakeholders differently? Is that sort of education a more sort of long-term project? How do we handle that? How do we change the idea that external stakeholders see risk managers as just buying insurance?
Yeah, I think that's already changing, actually. I've had some very interesting discussions with people in the last few months around things like cyber risk and safety risk and so on, where I think that the insurance industry is much more ready to come to discussions around the whole kind of stakeholder, the requirements of organizations. Because if you take something like cyber risk, then as an organization, you want to protect against it. There is no doubt that it's an absolutely fundamental risk that you have to ensure that you're protected from. And there are organizations out there that specialize in helping you. But ultimately, you need that final umbrella which allows you, if you are the unlucky one, or get hit first, or events just happen, then insurance is absolutely key, and it's about having that joined up and grown up decision from the organization's point of view, through the experts all the way to the insurance level, because you need all of those levels. I think one of the problems we have is that people are not allowing enough time to have those discussions, and there's a sort of a level of again, maybe not fear, but just uncomfortableness about talking about things that perhaps they're not 100% sure that they understand fully, or that if you're trying to enter into a contract with somebody, then our whole reticence about open conversations when we're then going to have to go into some commercial discussion, because the insurance industry welcomes people managing risk, in my view, because it reduces the cost of payouts, or at least if they're not welcoming it, then they should be. So I think it's the external stakeholder question is really about us just having, as risk professionals, being more confident that you can put those things on the table, you can discuss them. And in the end, yes, you might need to go into some hard-nosed discussions and about exactly who's responsible for what. But in my opinion, I think that those stakeholder discussions are a growing part of our risk professionals' lives, and we need to get used to it and get comfortable with it.